Hey everyone! Okay, so this week we're covering World War II. So this is the war that most of y'all know about. This is the war with Hitler, the war with the atomic bombs, the war where we go against Japan. Okay, so this is that war, the one that you always think of. This is what Captain America was in. Okay, I love this war. It's one of my favorite time periods. Okay, so we're going to be learning about why did the U.S. get involved, how was Texas affected, and how did the war end. Oh, hi, kitty. Okay, so Texas in World War One. World Two. We are not going to join the war until it's already been started, just like in World War One. We're going to play the game of neutrality, meaning that we're not going to get in, but we will kind of support one side more than the other. This is my cat. And we are going to end up trying to make money off of this like we do anytime there's an opportunity. Okay? So this is the Brain Pop video. You just need to watch it. Okay, it gives really good detail about how did the first war lead to this war, and then I want you to tell me one important thing that you learned about the war from the video. Now, this is a world map of all the countries and which side they took during the war. Okay, so we have two sides. We have the Allies and we have the Axis. Okay, so the Allies are the side that we will eventually join. That's going to be majority of the world. So on this map, if you can see, all right, so the green is before Pearl Harbor, which I will get to. So those are the Allies. Now, it's important to note, so there's Great Britain right there. It was one of the major Allied powers. Back in this time period in the 1800s, Great Britain controlled a majority of countries. It's kind of crazy. It's called imperialism, which we talked about in our World War I presentation. So they controlled Canada. This is Greenland. Okay. They also controlled Australia, New Zealand. Those are former British colonies. India is a former British colony. So that makes sense, right? That there's Egypt. It was a former British colony. A lot of the African countries are former French colonies. Lots of Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. Those are also former French territory, countries. So it makes sense that those are all going to band together because you're like, okay, why does Hitler expanding, invading all these neighboring countries and Japan kind of doing the same, why does that cause Africa to get involved? They're not even on the same continent. It's because of the allies and the alliances and all the imperialism that's still remaining. And then you have your Axis powers. So our Axis powers are in black. There's very few, but we need to remember that Japan, very powerful. It's also its own little island, which makes it very hard to invade. Okay, if you're going to stage an invasion, you cannot retreat except back to the water. So Japan is pretty well surrounded, and they can protect themselves. They also have all these tiny little islands around them that they're going to set up shop, and that's where they'll be attacking the ally fleets, the navies that go in there. And then Russia will start off as an Axis, and then they're going to have their Great Revolution where they basically overthrow people, and then they'll join with the Allied powers. All right, so how is Texas life affected? So we are going to join. The U.S. will join after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. You've probably seen the movie, or you've heard of the movie Pearl Harbor. It's excellent, but PG-13, so if you're not 13, don't watch it. Okay, and so we are going to see that Texans, just like in the last war, are still going to be effective. All right, we're going to have a lot more Texans serve this time, and actually, Texas will become very well known for our great military strength. Almost 750,000 Texans served. So that was the largest percentage of any other state serving. Okay, so doesn't mean that we had the most, but it means our percentage was the greatest. They're going to start rationing food just like last time. They're also going to ration other stuff like bacon grease because you can use that for bombs. And they're also going to focus a lot of their energy on industries that help out the war front. So a little often talked about is this thing called the Bracero program. So it was created because they needed workers to work in the fields, to work in these jobs that the men had left. And women were coming into these roles, but they needed more power. And so they're going to create this Bracero program where they would have Mexican migrants come up to Texas to work. promise was that they could get citizenship afterwards, but they were shipped back without citizenship. So definitely not one of our highest points. It's it's not a great thing that we have in our history, but it's something that we need to recognize and honor. So women are going to step up. Remember, they've gotten the right to vote thanks to their help in World War I. Now in World War II, they're going to want even more help. So women are really going to take over. They can join like the military, but they cannot fight. So they're going to stay in non-combat roles. So they're going to stay back, like becoming mechanics. They're going to be like, we call them the bomb girls. They've filled the bombs that would be dropped. They filled artillery, like they would fill bullets, things like that. And so then we had the WASPs, which is the Women Air Force Service Pilots. So they could fly planes, and they would often fly them like, okay, we're going to take our planes that we've serviced, we fixed, and we're going to fly them over to another base, drop them off for them to be deployed into war. So they didn't actually physically fight. Women haven't had the right to fight in combat until like 10 years ago. So you're going to see lots of women stepping up to fill in the military roles as well. So we do have quite a few important Texans. So these are 4 that I wanted to highlight. So we have in government, we have this guy nicknamed Cactus Jack. So he was vice president for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, who was president for a pretty long time during this war. He also before the war started, he was in the, he was the vice president. And then we have this lady called Oveta Culpabi. So she was a Texan woman chosen by the president to help direct the Women's Army Corps. So she would coordinate the women that were working non-combat roles in the Army. So Audie Murphy, where I used to live over by, down by Bandera, they had this street that was called Audie Murphy Freeway, and it was named after him. So he was this actually pretty small guy. He was shorter than me, so he's like, I'm 5'6", so he's like probably about my height or a little shorter. He was really skinny, not who you would think would be the like most decorated war hero of this war, but he will earn like 34 medals, not just from the US either. So he'll earn them from France, from Belgium, which were also allied countries, and he'll win the Medal of Honor, and that's like the highest military award you can get besides the Purple Heart, and he's gonna win that for like taking single-handedly on like 200 German soldiers, so his rest of his group could escape, and he will end up escaping as well. And then after the war, he actually becomes a very famous Hollywood actor. So if you look at the movies from like the 40s and 50s, he is a big star in those, which is very interesting. He came from Hunt, Texas, so that's about like an hour and a half north of San Antonio. And finally, Chester Nimitz. So he was the admiral, meaning like he is the head honcho. He was one below the president when it came to the war, and he was in charge of basically all the fighting in the Pacific. So we had basically 2 wars going on. We call them theaters. When you get to high school, they'll talk about like the European theater and the Pacific theater. This is not like movie theaters, even though that's how you're going to think of them. So the Pacific theater was the fighting that was happening with Japan. Pretty like Germany and Japan never combined their troops to fight like one mega army. They kept separate. So we had basically 2 wars going on, one in the Pacific, one in Europe. So in the Pacific with the Navy, because it's the ocean, they were led by Chester Nimitz. He's from Fredericksburg, so that's just north of San Antonio. And he is going to be in charge of them. And so he's going to fight the Japanese. And then the guy that's in charge of the European theater is a guy who's eventually going to become the president, Dwight Eisenhower. And he actually was born in Texas as well. So the 2 main guys fighting and leading this war are both Texans, which is awesome and makes us seem very cool. So how did World War II end? Most of y'all, if you've heard of World War II, know how it ended, all right? Hitler will surrender in Germany, so in Europe. That part of the war will end when he surrenders because he's basically surrounded. Germany has started to be invaded with the help of the US, the British. The French have like pushed him out of France, and they've confined him to Germany, and he commits suicide. And so that ends the war. So then Germany surrenders. Japan does not surrender, okay? They aren't like losing, really. They can keep going for a long time. And so the president FDR makes the very it's a very intense decision to go ahead and drop what we call the atomic bombs. So you've probably heard of the A bombs, the atomic bombs, the big nuclear bombs. This was developed in the middle of the desert in Nevada and New Mexico. So in the West. It was developed, and so the U.S. decided we can either drop this bomb and kill our enemies, and not that many, not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, or this war is going to keep going on for years, and this could mean the deaths of millions of more people. So they make the decision to drop the bomb. So they have a couple bombs, but they drop one first in this place called Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, depends on how you say it. It within seconds of it detonating, 90% of the city is destroyed and people are vaporized because of the immense heat that this puts off. So all they had left of some people that were right where the bomb was dropped is shadows. That's all they have of the people left over. And then the horrible thing that we didn't know was going to happen was all this radiation, which is gives you cancer and things like that, affects the people that were maybe not at the epicenter, but were maybe a little further out, and they're going to have horrible health issues and they'll die quite quickly as well. There's also huge cancer rates in this part of Japan because of the atomic bombs that were dropped. Now, after the first bomb, Japan still does not surrender. They say, no, we're going to keep going. I think it made them more angry at first. And then a few days later, America drops the second atomic bomb on a city called Nagasaki, and that kills another 40,000 Japanese people. And so finally the Japanese emperor surrenders unconditionally, meaning I'm done. There's no I have nothing that I can conditionally bring. I can't say, well, we'll surrender if he just is I can't do this again. My country cannot take another atomic bomb. And these cities were chosen because they're major manufacturing cities, so they were where a lot of the war supplies were being created for the Japanese army and military, and so that was why they were chosen. And it is actually a horrible bomb. We've had these repercussions of it because more people afterwards were hey, I want one of those, and so they start developing them, and this is where we are today with all the nuclear stuff is because of this. Okay, and finally, this is a cartoon created by Looney Tunes, and it's going to go over, it's a propaganda. So remember, propaganda is things that were created to make you think a certain way. And this was created for children, because remember, Looney Tunes is for children. So you're going to watch the video and kind of figure out why would they make it for children, and who are they trying to show in the video. I think it will be pretty obvious when you watch it, but if not, you can always just it's your opinion. But there is one right answer, and I think you're going to get it because most of y'all are all very smart cookies. So that is World War II in a nutshell. And I know that we didn't have as much time to go over it as normal, and I love showing all the videos and talking about it because you'll have wonderful questions. So if you have more questions, leave them in your presentation, or you can comment on the assignment and we can have a great discussion that way. So thank you guys. Have fun. Remember, this is due Sunday night.